So, welcome to Tara Institute. My name's Damien, and I'm leading this month's introductory talks. And my topic is cause and effect. So, the last few weeks we've been sort of creeping up on the details of cause and effect very slowly. And I've done this on purpose, with the main aim being that before we start to talk about virtuous and non-virtuous actions and what we can do and what we can't do, before we start really trying to accept that, the first thing is to accept whether cause and effect exists or not. So effectively we can say there's multiple possibilities that, and cause and effect is really about my experience, right? It's about my experience. So my joy and suffering, mental and physical joy and suffering, is it, or does it have a cause, right? Is it causeless, like completely random? Is it an external agent who decides what you experience and what you don't experience? Is it a mixture of some things are caused, some things are random, some things I just don't know? Whatever. These are all the possibilities. So Buddhism asserts that all my joy and suffering, mental and physical joy and suffering, has a cause. So I've been sort of talking around that a little bit in the last 2 weeks, and approaching, just sort of like from a naive point of view, just suddenly thinking, I'm a living being, all of you are living beings, dogs, cats, elephants, zebras, ants, worms, all living beings. This, and I think in the first week I said, how many living beings are on the earth? And I said maybe 1 trillion or something. Anyway, I looked it up on Google, just how many ants are there in the world? And there are 20 quadrillion ants in the world, which means 1,000 trillion million, or 1,000, yeah. Anyway, a huge number, 20 quadrillion ants. Now, each one of those ants is just like me in not wanting suffering and wanting some sort of joy and pleasure and satisfaction. So the question that I posed in the first week was, if we, even this is irrespective of religion or philosophy or anything, if you just sort of look at the world and you say, I'm a living being and I have this existence, this is my existence, a human existence. And there's a little dust mite, and he has, or they have an existence. I want happiness, I don't want to be suffering. The little dust mite also wants happiness and does not want to suffer. So the first thing we have to sort of acknowledge is that for whatever reason, if there is a reason, so I'm already presuming a reason, but let's say there's no reason, but it just so happens that I have this good human life, you all have this good human life. And a whole bunch of other living beings do not have anything like this human life. They have a much more difficult circumstance. So irrespective of any religion or science or philosophy or anything, we can just see that circumstance. And we can choose to think, well, there's no reason for that, there's no cause for that, that's just the way it is. Or we can think, I have this good situation, all these other creatures do not. So I feel that there must be a cause for that situation. So this is really what I've been sort of talking about, is coming to some recognition that cause and effect, or understanding that there is a cause, gives an explanation for why the circumstance is that here we are really at the pinnacle of living beings' experience. As human beings in Australia, in Melbourne, with these conditions, we are really, you have to admit, we are pretty much at the pinnacle of life on Earth. Are we? Does that seem real? Does that seem like a reasonable statement, that we are effectively, of all of the types of life on the earth, we are at the pinnacle of that type of life? So, the reason I say the refuge prayer at the beginning is for my own benefit, to try to clarify my own motivation for talking and my own motivation. So, here we can consider this situation, and no matter what mechanism we come to think is why we're at the pinnacle of this life on earth, it doesn't matter whether you think it's a God creator or randomness or cause and effect, or somehow you won the lottery. You don't know when you bought the ticket, but you won the lottery. Like there's some mechanism, or maybe there's no mechanism, but irrespective of whether there's a mechanism or isn't a mechanism, here we are at the pinnacle of life on earth. And so we can approach this discussion by motivating ourselves, thinking that it is reasonable that if I am at the pinnacle of life on earth, it is reasonable for me to have the wish to benefit others. Because all these other creatures are not in this fortunate circumstance that I am in. And so, as a consequence of being in such a fortunate circumstance, to generate a mind that, as much as I can, I will try to benefit others. So this is sort of coming into a Buddhist motivation that, that the human life itself is quite rare. Like 7 or 8 billion is nothing compared to the 20 quadrillion ants. But even amongst the 7 or 8 billion humans, there are very few that have this circumstance, coming to hear some of the teachings of the Buddha, to meditate, to contemplate, to discuss, and to think with a clear mind. These are unique circumstances that are, in fact, very rare. And so we should, in a way, to honour that rarity of our human condition, we should try to generate a motivation to benefit others. So, I'm hoping now that... so in this presentation, before we start talking about the 10 virtuous actions and the 10 non-virtuous actions and all of that, it sort of says that we have to come to a point where we totally accept cause and effect. And so there's 4 aspects of cause and effect that I want to talk about tonight. So The first one is that the cause and the effect, they are similar. That the cause gives rise to an effect which is similar to the cause. So a virtuous cause gives rise to a virtuous effect. So a cause which avoids suffering or prevents suffering gives rise to a result that is the absence of suffering. A cause that is harmful and causes suffering to somebody else gives rise to a result which is an experience of suffering, of harm. So that relationship between cause and effect, that they ripen in accordance with the cause. The nature of the cause is reflected then in the nature of the result. Then the second one is that our collection. So the analogy that's given here, the term that's used is they talk about karmic seeds, that we have a vast storehouse of karmic seeds, which are the consequence of our previous actions. And so it's just a useful analogy that we talk about a seed, a karmic seed. So the analogy, it sort of cross-references to plants, that you have a bag of seeds in your garage and one day you go out and you plant them in the garden, and if the conditions are right, if all of the conditions are present, if the soil is good, if the right water is there, the sunlight, the right conditions, there's no insects to eat them, then the seed will ripen and it will flower or grow into something which is related to the seed. So if it's an apple seed, then the plant that comes from that will be an apple plant. So that's the first aspect of karma, that the result is in accordance with the cause. And then the second result is that the karmic seeds are accumulating, they're increasing, and the results are an increasing result. So, if we think about plants and that, you plant a tiny seed and you can get an enormous tree. That one person can do an action, either very positive or very negative, and then other people can experience a good result or a bad result for many years, many years. So there's this aspect of that karma is increasing, the karmic accumulation is increasing. And then the third aspect of karma, which is a really important one to accept, that I will not experience a result if I have not created the cause. I will not experience a result if I have not created the cause. And then the fourth aspect of karma is that once a karmic seed is created, it does not lose its potency. So, if you accept that, past lives, we can start to see that we have an immense accumulation of past actions. Even in this life, even if you think in this life that you just have an immense accumulation of actions. Maybe as a child you liked killing insects, killing animals, killing anything, and then later you stop doing that. But there's an aspect that sort of says that created karma is still viable, it's still potent. Actions that we, and so in particular, from a, let's say in a Buddhist context, actions that we've done in past lives which we do not remember. This is an aspect we do not remember, we don't recognise them, but there is this vast storehouse of karmic seeds, and if those karmic seeds meet the right conditions, then they may ripen, manifest in a result. So a lot of Buddhist practice is focused around the idea that if the environment that I create in my mind, to some extent determines what karmic seeds will ripen and what karmic seeds will not ripen. And so that's why, let's say anger in particular, that if your mind is very, very angry, it has the potency to create the conditions in which karmic seeds of a similar type will ripen. And so it means that the environment of anger can enable a very negative experience to ripen. And so if you want to prevent things happening to you, it's wise to control your mind so that strong anger or strong jealousy, etc., pride, all these sort of negativities don't occur too much, because they enable similar karmas to ripen. So that's the fourth aspect, is that so the karmic seeds do not lose their potency. And if you start thinking about it, it's a bit of a frightening thought that we have this vast collection of previous actions that if they meet the right conditions, then they will ripen and I will experience the result. So karma cause is related, the effect is related to the cause is related to the effect. The karma is increasing, our karmic collections are increasing. If I have not created the cause, I will not experience the result. And a karmic seed once created does not lose its potency. So these are general descriptions of the way karma works. So it's important to keep reminding yourself about the example of like planting a seed. So if the seeds have become burnt or damaged, you can plant as many as you like, they're not going to grow into anything. If you plant the seeds into the wrong soil or the wrong environment, or just scatter them about, on the surface or something, they will not ripen in their result. If there's no sunlight, or there's no water, or there's no nutrients in the soil, they do not ripen. So the same with us, that karmic seeds will ripen if the conditions are all present. If the conditions are not present, then they will not ripen. And so that, to a large degree, is the motivation then for us to practice virtue. So the idea of practicing virtue and avoiding non-virtue is twofold. One aspect is to avoid creating future suffering by not creating a negative karma or a negative seed which has a negative result. And then secondly, trying not to provide the environment in which negative karmic seeds can ripen. So you've probably heard of the terms mindfulness and alertness. So when we meditate, we're trying to cultivate mindfulness and alertness, and also in the meditation we are also applying mindfulness and alertness. But there's also a third aspect which is often taught along with mindfulness and alertness, and it's called conscientiousness. And the idea of conscientiousness is that, so in our daily life, mindfulness is, for example, trying to keep your mind on a virtuous object, keeping focused on a virtuous object. And alertness is a bit of a watching, discriminating intelligence which can tell you whether you are on that object or you've lost the object. Okay, but conscientiousness is a sort of an aspect of your mind where you maintain all of the time, let's say, a state, for instance, of love and compassion, that you actually try to keep your mind in a mood or a mode of love and compassion all of the time. And that conscientiousness then, it creates an environment in which it's more conducive for positive karmic seeds to ripen, and it's less conducive for negative karmic seeds to ripen. So maintaining your mind in a state of love and compassion to some degree becomes a protection that inhibits the ripening of negative karmic seeds, and it facilitates the ripening of positive karmic seeds. So that's why conscientiousness is encouraged. So, is everybody convinced about cause and effect? Or, what's the vote? Is it feasible? Is it a mixture? Some things are, some things aren't. Is there, and obviously different religions have different ideas, and certainly Christianity is talking about a creator God, and the whole Judeo-Christian tradition talks about the creator God. So Buddhism doesn't, and that's a very important distinction. And we're all subject to these different influences, so it's quite reasonable that it's difficult to fully accept the idea of cause and effect. So just an example of how we, to some degree, the way that a belief in cause and effect works. This is just there's a text called the 8 Verses of Thought Transformation, and so one of the verses there is that when somebody out of jealousy treats me badly with abuse, insults, and the like. So this is a thought transformation text. So when somebody out of jealousy treats me with abuse, insults, and the like, I shall accept their harsh words and offer them the victory. So that's the thought transformation technique. And really, that technique is fully based in this idea of cause and effect. So it's sort of accepting that somebody insults me and tries to hurt me or whatever, because I have somehow facilitated that cause. I have somehow created a seed, a karmic seed, that for me, if I suffer from it, if I suffer from the insult, so they have created the insult, I have created my response. And then the technique is that I accept that response and I offer them the victory. And so what that does is it prevents me from reacting and retaliating, and also I think it prevents me from thinking too much about the whole situation. You just accept the insult and offer the victory to the other. And I think that gives an indication of how we can actually use an understanding of cause and effect in changing the present moment, but in particular changing our normal reaction and our future, and it avoids creating a negative future result by that process. And that's really something to think about. You know, the 8 verses of thought training. I think John Wright covered them in his series of Monday nights last month, if I'm not mistaken. So the 8 verses of thought transformation are really great text, but that verse in particular, I think, indicates sort of this process that I might experience some negativity, but I circumvent my normal reaction by transforming the way I think about it. And then that then, in a way, you can say, alters the future, because I do not follow my normal response, which might be anger and retaliation and deep suffering. So by offering the victory to the other, it circumvents the idea of, oh, that's so unfair, I feel really hurt. It's, you know, all that sort of feeling. It circumvents that feeling, that response. And to me, that's the way that a real understanding of cause and effect is used. Carol?
Actually, so you acknowledge that it's happening to you, that's already good, and then you just don't react.
Yeah, so the observation is that you acknowledge that it's happening to you and you don't react. I would just add that it's more than not reacting. The instruction is that you give the victory to the other.
So how do we do that? Give victory to another. How do we do that?
I think it means that it's sort of like you fully accept the insult.
Don't prize yourself enough to take offence to it.
Yeah. So you don't take any offence, and you in your mind, no negative reaction. And you know, maybe you show some, you know, show some really lowness. Let them be the victor.
Doesn't that encourage them to do more of it?
So, does that encourage people to do more? Well, you know, it's something to examine whether a retaliatory behaviour works or not. And you can examine history, you can examine your own life, you can look at other people's lives. So to examine, does retaliation pay off? That's part of understanding and analysing cause and effect.
Well, I'm not suggesting retaliation, but I think that if a person is trying to wind you up or trying to get a reaction out of you, or trying to hurt you, and if they are left feeling that, wow, great, I've really landed a blow there, that may well encourage them to do more of that sort of thing. So
yeah. So look. So the discussion, the discussion here is about. Yeah. Look, this is the big problem. How much of a policeman can we be of other people's thinking and actions? Right. And I think the reality is we can't. What other people think and do, we have little to no effect, control over. So, in your own mind, to look at those two scenarios. Now, I would say that when others out of jealousy, so that's the motivation, treat me badly with abuse, insults and the like, I will accept their harsh words and offer the other the victory. Okay, so the first thing is that response takes courage. Okay, that's one aspect. And then to look at if you openly and totally do that, what is your actual mental experience? And I think that if you can do that, then your own mental experience, there is no suffering in your own mental experience. So, if anything, that has disempowered the insult and the abuse. If its intention was to harm you, but you suffer no harm, then to some degree you have disempowered that action.
oh, sure, but we're getting into semantics, but
Yeah, okay, so,
the other person's victory,
yeah.
that's like letting them see that they've harmed you, which is not what I would think is the best way to respond. Like road rage
Well,
or something like
yeah,
that,
yeah.
it's best to just like, oh, didn't even
Road rage, exactly. Somebody zips past you and bips their horn and does the finger out the window and yells at you. Okay. I'll just pull into the left lane, I'll drive it slowly and I'll wait till you've gone. Let them have the victory. Or do you chase them down the road and try to cut them off and show them how bad their action has been? It's a good example because this is really the challenge. How much can we actually show somebody else that they've done wrong? Like executing criminals, does that actually work to show them that they've done something wrong? Invading a country that did something wrong to us, does that really show them that they've done something wrong? Really? Kicking your dog because he jumped on the table and ate your lunch, Does it work? Does it work? That's the absolute question. All of these circumstances for us to check, does it work? So, just one example. I like this example. Some years ago, a student that came here was a teacher of, really mentally challenged children in Tasmania or somewhere. And they came and they asked Geshe Doga the question about, these kids being really badly behaved and this and that, and asked about, is it okay to be wrathful with the kids, to demonstrate to them that it was an incorrect behaviour and to try to correct their behaviour and all that. And Geshe Doga answered and he said, you know, sometimes wrathful actions may work, but the application of wrath requires incredible wisdom to be correct. For it to be correct, you have to have great wisdom to be able to apply a wrathful response in the right circumstance, in the right manner. But he said, nobody misunderstands kindness. So whatever the circumstance, if you act with kindness, and I think the road rage is potentially one where you can say, you know, the kind act here is to just pull over and let the person go and take the loss, you know, like take the loss yourself, and that is a kindness. And so Geshe Doga's answer in relation to this question was, nobody misunderstands kindness. And I think that's a really important thing to see. You know, whether it's with children or animals or anything, that even animals do not misunderstand kindness. But wrath, you know, a wrathful action to a dog or a cat, they're going to misunderstand that. You know, they may not see that as, oh, that's a really good method that you've used on me. You know, that's not going to happen. You know. So anyway, this is all about the acceptance of cause and effect. So a really important thing to fully embrace. And in this text here, it says, you know, before we start talking about, you know, negative and positive actions and their karmic results and all of that different classification and the experience of that, before we start doing that, to really try to embrace the idea of these four aspects of karma, you know, that the effect is similar to the cause, it's increasing. If I haven't created the cause, I will not experience the result. And that once I've created the cause, at some point, in some way, it will ripen. It doesn't lose its potency. So accepting those four aspects, I mean, they can be very difficult for us to see, so to some degree we're accepting them on faith. But once we have embraced that idea, then we can then approach the idea of morality and doing virtuous actions with a very different mindset to just coming into them as a set of rules. You know, so the observance of the 10 virtuous actions, we can treat them, you know, sort of in a simplistic way. We can just come in and we say, oh, the Buddha said, here are 10 things that you should avoid doing, you know, like the 10 commandments. They're very similar. Here are 10 things you should avoid doing. And then out of some sort of sense of faith, we just say, okay, that's what I'll do. But here, having a really good understanding of cause and effect and accepting this process of cause and effect, we can then approach the idea of virtuous behaviour in a much more thoroughly established way. You know, on the basis of the truth of cause and effect and how it works. So let's just do a little bit of meditation and then we'll have some more time for questions. Can I ask if anybody's here for the very first time tonight? Yeah. Oh, a few of you. Good. Well, welcome. And so we'll meditate just on the breath. And there's several different types of breathing meditation, but the one we're doing pretty much is we're breathing in and out through the nostrils, and we're looking at the sensation of the breath as it comes in and out. But our object, our mental object of focus, is the awareness of the breath coming in and out, just the experience of the awareness of the breath coming in and going out, rather than the physical sensation. So that might take some time to understand what that means, but first of all, bring your concentration within the room and within yourself. Let go of the past and the future. No thinking about outside or tomorrow or yesterday. And so bring all of your states of mind within, and let all of these different distractions drop away and keep letting them drop away until you have no thought in your mind, and then turn your attention to the breath and focus absolutely on the breath. And using the motivation that we established earlier, the wish to benefit others, and seeing this meditation as a way of developing that ability to benefit others. So you can just relax your concentration a little bit. Now, just spend a minute or two thinking about cause and effect, or no cause, or an external cause, or a mixture, and just looking at those different possibilities or different proposals, and understanding your own view, like understanding your own inherited view or cultural view, or if what is in your mind, just looking at what view do you have in your mind. And so when looking at the view, what view you have in your mind, look at your tendency to blame others, or your tendency to feel unfair treatment or victim treatment, not recognizing, if we talk about our life situation being at the pinnacle of all living beings on earth, whether you fight that idea, you sort of don't accept that idea that we have such a fortunate life. So these are all aspects that indicate how you actually think about whether there is cause and effect, or what the circumstances might be. And just bring your concentration back to the room. So we've got a little bit of time for some discussion or things. So. Yeah.
Before you were talking about how it's karma and yoga and cause and effect is sort of an insurance for us to remember behaviour and compassionate and loving way. And it feels like a bit of a thing to all religions that there's this kind of idea of if you don't do this will happen. So it's sort of like coming from a place of fear. Do you think there's any way we can just do this because
It's the right thing to do.
yeah, just because it's in us. It's in us.
Sorry.
It's not in us. You know what I mean? As human beings, like, is it just not in us to be motivated to be sort of want to be decent, kind, loving, loving, without some form of motivation, like the karma that is, spread the bad apple tree of how, the Judeo-Christian or
Yeah. Okay, there's a whole bunch of different questions in there. That last one though is the human quality, the human experience. What exactly is that? And so I think I mentioned last week or the week before that the primary cause for the human life primarily is morality, not harming others. So this is from past lives. So the primary cause for a human life is not harming others. And then there's additional causes for our circumstances, and that is that in my own continuum, prior actions of generosity have produced this good environment that I experience. There's plenty of food, drink, shelter, wealth, etc. And the prior actions of patience have produced good relationships and friends and, nice sort of interactions with people is a consequence of patience. And also attractiveness is said to be a consequence of patience. And then also, but in particular, the general practice of non-harming has created a circumstance where, in general, we are not harmed. We're not like the fish in the ocean where there's a bigger fish every minute of the day hunting them down to eat them. We aren't in that circumstance as humans, and particularly here in Australia, in Brighton or whatever, it's a pretty non-harmful environment. So they're all the condors, but one of the results of karma is that we experience a result similar to the cause in terms of experience, but also in terms of disposition. And this is an aspect that I really like to think about myself, is that, so as humans, we have a disposition towards love and compassion. And we have a disposition, these things are called human qualities, so we all have a level of disposition towards love and compassion, affection, good community, family values, love, and, these are things that we think are inherent in being a human. And the point that I made the other week is that these are also a disposition which is the result of karmic action. And not all living beings have that disposition. And to some degree also, not all human beings have that disposition. Some don't, or don't have it very strongly. And we call them psychopaths or sociopaths or whatever, because they seem to be missing that disposition. And that just means that whatever karma has ripened for them to produce this human life, that aspect is missing. And a snake, some other, whatever other creature you might think is very negative or aggressive, is potentially missing that ingredient also in its experience. But we have that disposition, and so we should not take that disposition for granted, that we just think it's natural that we have a level of love and compassion naturally, and we talk about it like that being human means naturally that we have this disposition. So part of cause and effect is seeing that, don't be so certain that it's always going to be there, because it also has causes, and we have to, if we want, Geshe Doga posed this question, do you like this life? Do you like this life? And if you like this life, so one aspect then is, you didn't create it yourself, like me right now. It's somehow created by a previous aspect of my continuum who very generously created the causes that have resulted in this life. And I should be grateful for that. So me, to answer that question, do I like this life? So am I going to create these causes for the future me to have this life? And so if I think, yeah, I like this life, and it's the right thing to do is for me to create the causes that my continuum continues to experience this type of life. So what do I have to do? And the answer is, in the same way that this life was created by morality, generosity and patience and non-harmfulness, then I need to practice morality, generosity, patience and non-harmfulness to create a future life like this. And again, that's because of cause and effect. So, yeah. Yeah. So the question is about enabling the conditions to ripen. Yeah. So, standing in the middle of the road, you know, going to a war zone, you know, deciding to hop into a submarine that nobody's tested, nobody knows anything about, and go to the bottom of the ocean, you know. I'm not going to say hopping on a Boeing Starlighter thing, going out at 3 a.m. in the morning and start picking fights with people, you know, like there's a whole bunch of things that are unwise. And, so like that, you know, stealing from people, you know, trying to shoot the president. Now, these are unwise actions because they can ripen karmas that for you will be really undesirable. So you're creating a condition. And so the important thing then is for us to not create the conditions for somebody else to suffer. And so that's why, if there's conflict or something, sometimes it can be really good for us, to accept the loss, give the victory to the other person, back away, take a low position, accept the loss and let them have the victory. And if anything, you might actually be preventing them from more suffering due to their jealousy or anger. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, on that one, that I really like, I don't know if it was 2 weeks ago, you were sort of saying, like in philosophy or ideologies, the notion that everything that has ever happened, we have done or been. Do you remember saying that? There's a lot of those lines.
Yeah.
Most of us don't.
Is what? There's a bit missing from the end of your sentence here.
In the experience of life. And so that to me is kind of when you're talking about, taking it on the chin, leaving the baby out its bottle. But we're not saying that. We're saying really take on the insult. It's almost like if we have that kind of idea, we can really actually take it on strongly.
Look, with that, I'm not going to answer your question because what you're doing is you're starting to think about this particular issue, and that's a really good thing. But it's something you need to do yourself, is think about this and the consequences of it, and over a period of time. It's something that you might take some time to really embrace and understand. And so you have to start by thinking about it. So it's a good thing to think about it. And sometimes being given an answer is not that helpful because it's more about your process of thinking, is really... So, yeah. Yeah.
In Buddhist philosophy, is there a notion of a life purpose, and is that kind of related to karma, or it's basically you're just bringing karma and that's it? Sort of?
Yeah. So the question is there a notion of a life purpose? And I'd say absolutely there is, and certainly in the Buddhist context. Finding meaning in life, let's say called finding meaning in life. So in the Buddhist context, anyway, they talk about there being 3 scopes of a worthwhile life. 3 scopes, 3 levels of a worthwhile life. And the first one is that I create a good future life for myself. Right? The second one is that I achieve the complete liberation from suffering for myself. And the third one is that I achieve the purpose of full enlightenment for the benefit of others. Right? So those, and they're all considered Buddhist motivations, different levels of Buddhist motivation. They're referred to as the 3 scopes of beings. So it's sort of like what is in your scope or your inclination to look for, to seek just a good rebirth, a good life, future life, hopefully endlessly having good future lives. And then secondly, to understand that this whole cycle of life is problematic, and then to seek and attain a liberation from that, a nirvana, what they call nirvana. And then thirdly, that instead of abandoning all living beings and just looking after yourself, that you have a motivation that you must benefit all living beings, and that the only way to really do that is to become enlightened. So they're the 3 scopes. So all of those scopes, we can say, is a purpose of life, purpose of life. And ideally, we try to cultivate that third one as our motivation and our aspiration. So, yeah. Oh, one more. Last one, yeah.
We said that we like the pinnacle of life, but maybe we're not like the pinnacle of life because like we just because we have so much that we start to create our own problems, and like we start to own so much that stuff.
Yeah, and destroy the planet, etc. Yeah. So the question is about whether we are the pinnacle of life. I'm just using that in a sort of a very worldly analysis of the world. Like without, imagining that there's no religion, nothing. Just putting all that aside and just looking at all the life forms on Earth, just on Earth. We're pretty lucky, and accepting that. So, but the reality is, like you say, that the human being, we might be at the top of this pyramid, but we're not doing very well with that power and that influence, So, but still, our mode of existence is pretty relatively very good, So thanks. Yeah. So let's just dedicate. So these aspects, which the motivation, have as high a motivation as you can generate, and then we sit here and we meditate and we discuss, and then we dedicate towards the highest purpose that we can imagine. And so imagine that all of us coming together and meditating, thinking together, this is something very rare and precious. And it takes the form of a ball of white light, and let that ball of light just dissolve completely into you and fill your body with light, and you make your mind very clear and open and expansive. And then imagine rays of light go out to every other living being and give them happiness and relieve them from suffering. Imagine that. All living beings free of suffering and abiding in happiness. And then let that light dissolve back into you. So it returns and it dissolves into you. And just feel very joyful at having been able to visualize that. So thank you very much. And we'll see you next week. So there's some cake, I hope, and tea and coffee and that in the dining room if you're able to stay for a little while. And yes, thank you.